our MC and moderator for today's conversation with Alon and Annie. Tony is just a fantastic marketer. He's 30 years experience in this. He is the managing director for business and development and brand at Environmental Systems Design. He's become a really good friend. I know him to be someone who empowers his team to do more together, which in some ways I think is probably really at the heart of what Agile is all about. Like, how can we do more quickly and together and efficiently and have success thereof. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tony, but I also, as promised, want to share these polling results. So we'll see if they show up here for everybody, hopefully. And there you have it, a lot of Agile curious people in the house. So I don't know if that was what you expected, Tony, but what do you think?
That's fantastic. And thank you so much, everyone who's here. This program is going to be great. We have 2 people who are marketing leaders who have been implementing this program for their companies. They're leading their companies through this with teams and coaches who are also going to join them as they present how they're bringing Agile into their companies. And who we have with us today is our guest, Annie Marsolais, and she is the CMO of Business Development Bank of Canada. And Alon Lopez, who is also a volunteer board member for ANA here, who leads marketing for Hillrom. And they both have their team and coaches joining us for their case studies or how they're using or bringing Agile into their organizations. So you're not here to listen to me talk. And we have, and I encourage everyone to bring their questions into the chats. There's gonna be a lot of things coming up. But Agile, what's really interesting about it is that there's certain terms and there's certain underlying precepts that really guide what Agile is. And so just to get started, since most of us are Agile curious, I'd like to introduce Annie Marsolais to give us a little bit of background on the Agile Marketing Manifesto. Annie?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Tony. And first, thank you for mentioning that we are marketing leaders. I'm certainly not an Agile expert, but I brought one with me. Thank you very much for having me. And a special thanks to Susan Martin, who introduced me to this community. Hi, Susan. Thank you for that. So there are certainly different ways and many ways of explaining Agile. And Agile is really frameworks, methodologies based on value creation and an open mindset. And as most of you know, Agile was first born and designed for software development. And we know that marketing and software development used to be quite far apart. And now it's getting closer as marketing expands and we expand our responsibilities. And so this is how some marketers a decade ago or so started exploring how Agile could be implemented to marketing. And this is a version of the value set in an Agile Marketing Manifesto that you see on screen. And there are lots of terms and principles that borrow to the original Agile Manifesto, but let me draw to your attention to things that will be very relatable, I hope, to your organization. So where we used to do big bang campaigns, Agile brings the adaptive, iterative campaign mindset, because we need to adapt everything we do to the situation. Same thing, so gone is static prediction. How can we leverage consumer insights in what we do? And from a few large bets, let's launch 2 big products this year. It's really about many small experiments. So the link is there for you to consult. This is one version of an Agile Marketing Manifesto. Over back to you, Tony, for more terms.
All right, thank you, Annie. And Alon Lopez is going to just go through some of the lingo and that comes with Agile. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tony. And I want to start out by saying I think it's great that almost a quarter of the people that responded to the poll are either using Agile or beginning to use it. So that's exciting. but I know that many of you are curious too. And just to make sure that we're level set on some terms that you'll see run through, the 2 case studies we have here from Hillrom and BDC. Starting with the word agile, we're all used to it being an adjective, but we really use it as a noun. And when you think of it as a noun, what that's meant to define is a set of methodologies and that help people focus on high value projects, working on it very cooperatively, and then being able to measure the impact of their efforts and sort of iterate and improve them over time. Think of that as a noun, agile. And then the first set of definitions here and sort of the vocabulary centers around people and how we organize people in teams. A scrum is an understanding, it's like an instance of agile. It's a set of projects and people working together to accomplish them in sort of a cluster, and you can have several scrums, addressing different parts of your business or different areas of projects. A set of people working on a particular area or particular deliverable would be a squad as a basic unit, and you can say several squads or a tribe. We don't often use that term, but it's the definition. And then this next set of terms is really around the work itself and how it's organized. The concept of a sprint is very central to Agile methodology. It's a short period of time that you go and define exactly what everybody's going to do and coordinate the work around specific outputs. And then the work itself is broken down into what we call user stories. Think of those as specific deliverables, but they're called user stories because they're expressed in the language of the outcome, that either a user or a customer would experience the output and the experience of the output. Several user stories can be clustered in an epic that may stretch across multiple sprints. And then finally, these user stories are collected. They're either assigned to a sprint or they're in the backlog. And the backlog is a set of user stories that haven't really been scheduled for completion yet, but you can see that they're there and you can start to chip away at those in each sprint as you move forward in time. And then the last point around work organization, points or story points are a unit of time and work that are needed to accomplish each individual task. And that allows us to measure from a capacity and workload perspective whether we're going to be able to accomplish the deliverables in a particular time. So story points typically are related to time. And you'll see what we use at Hillrom, but you'll see points used as how long it takes. And if a story is blocked, that term is really important too. That means that work is halted on it. So, the points tell you how long it'll take, but if you're blocked, then that's interrupted and you have to manage that from a resourcing perspective. And then the final concept that sort of stands apart is this idea of not most valuable player, but minimum viable product. And this is really central to that mindset that Annie was talking about. If you move quickly in an agile methodology and agile mode, you want to figure out what the minimum sort of deliverable is that you can go live with, that you can launch, and then start measuring and iterating from there, and deciding exactly what that MVP or minimum viable product is really important and central to Agile. So we talk about that a lot in Agile. What's the quickest we can get to, a deliverable and get something out, and then you start from there. So those are the key terms.
All right, thank you, Alon. This was really meant to just get us on a level set. Earlier, Dakota had mentioned Aerosmith and some sort of reference to it. In my mind, Steven Tyler, who is the singer from Aerosmith, was connected to saying, "Don't bore us, get us to the chorus," right? And so we really wanted to get into the meat of, here's a practical application of Agile concepts and principles being used by marketing leaders right now. And we encourage you again, please add your questions into the chat as they present how they're using it. And toward the end of the session, after Alon does his presentation with Hillrom, we will get to some of those questions. We'd like to invite you to ask your questions of our teams here. So again, thank you so much. I will not bore you. We're going to go straight to the chorus. Annie, Marsolais, please share how you're using Agile at the Business Development Bank of Canada. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Tony, and hi. So before I jump right in, so BDC, Business Development Bank of Canada, what we do, we're the bank for Canadian entrepreneurs. So this is all that we do. We lend we do commercial loan and advisory services for small businesses in Canada. Needless to say that with the crisis, a lot of small businesses have suffered, so we've been quite busy, and agility has been key to be able for us to deliver some of our services to businesses during that really difficult period. So with me today is Alex Bergeron, our Agile coach, and I will explain how he got to start working with us in a moment. And he will be there to answer some of your more technical questions. As I said, I'm not an Agile expert. I certainly opened and led the way in us embracing Agile, and here's our story. So why Agile at BDC in the first place? So in essence, BDC is going, as many organizations, through a digital transformation. And digital transformation means Agile ways of working. And it was certainly being used already in our IT department, and with my mobility, because we developed some apps for entrepreneurs, and in our web team, so the web team that does our website notably, so they've been using some of what Alan has described, you know, Scrum, sprints, user stories, and backlog. But most of the rest of the organization, and certainly the rest of the marketing organization, was not at all familiar with Agile. And the survey that we did was similar to the one that we did today. So about half of my team had very little or no knowledge of what Agile, but they were certainly curious. So to give a head start to the rest of the marketing organization outside of mobility and web, I brought together my team, my management team, so only the managers, to expose them to what is Agile. The goal with that was to share a common knowledge of what Agile is and what Agile is not. For us to have a common language about Agile in the future, but most importantly, is wanting to make sure that I was getting them to embrace and want to try Agile and get their buy-in before we were venturing further into Agile. So we did a couple of things. So we did Agile 101, and then what Agile is, the state of Agile at BDC within IT. Then we brought some experts or people more familiar with Agile and marketing to, once again, working sessions to bring my management team to be more familiar. And then we said, well, we need to practice what Agile can look like. And we did a Kempa session. We learned how to build pizza and be very efficient at it, all with paper. So it was really fun. So they got to see how tricky it could be to work with a backlog, what you need to prioritize, how you need to work together to make it happen. And through that phased approach to Agile, I was really able to see which managers would be more reluctant and more resisting the idea of using Agiles, because we have our own ways of working and behaving. So it enabled me to unblock that along the way. And then, because they said, okay, up to now we're comfortable, let's find a pilot that we could use in our typical marketing environment, that we could try Agile outside of the IT environment. So their criteria for the pilot were quite simple. It needed to be 100% marketing led, so no dependencies, because we really wanted to test and try it. Second, it needed to bring together a cross-functional team of marketing experts, because I have certain divisions within my team. So it needed to bring together cross-functional people. I needed to have a product owner with some Agile knowledge. So we found one within our team. And the resources needed to be almost 100% dedicated to this. And the last but most important point, we brought in an Agile coach, Alex, to lead us in doing this first pilot, the webinar pilot. So we ventured in that about a year ago. And the first step was really from what we used to be, and doing webinars at BDC used to be a nightmare, literally. Every year we had the ambition of doing about 4 webinars, and we were in the end doing 1 because it was too cumbersome, it was too complicated, too many people involved, and it was creating a lot of frustration. So from having different people in silos, like a copywriter to the marketing automation expert to the lead generation expert, we brought them in a squad oriented and value, and together working really close, being coached by Alex, and with our product owner really focusing on the value to be delivered on, not the outcome. we were really able to learn a lot, and for them to see that working together versus just handling back their to-do, creating a lot of efficiencies and synergies in the way of working together. So Alex will walk you through precisely how the squad works.
Thank you, Annie. So I'm going to go a little bit more into detail, just to give you a little bit of how it works. So first, we've used the Kanban methodology. We felt that it was fitting a little bit more than the Scrum frameworks, because we had people that were not fully 100% dedicated. We were navigating kind of a lot of chaos and uncertainty, a lot of switching priorities around the webinars, which was why it was so cumbersome in the first place to do so. Because remember, people used to be acting as experts, but in different silos. So bringing them together did not necessarily mean they would have any less work to do. So Kanban enabled us to implement daily visualization. And so we did this using Microsoft Azure. The goal was to focus on the work items and focus on getting them done, and not on talking about being busy, like individual workload of each people. And so what that enabled us to do is having, daily meetings where the talk was not about getting busy and what I'm going to do today, but more about how can we get this, this paper, this virtual paper in our Azure board to done. So what can we do? And that led to some happenings of, graphic designers going, well, I have time, so I'm going to go see IT and see if they can help us unblock this item today so we can deliver it. And so it really, that coupled with, the continuous improvement, we did retrospection every 2 weeks, and people actually, it got heated in those sessions. So people were really like having, the goal of the mission of the squad in mind. They were like acting as leaders, and so we really like improved. And what it did is it kind of created a culture where everyone in the team was a leader and wanted things to get done as soon as possible. We also started using Microsoft Teams, which is a chat feature. Before we were forced to work remotely when the pandemic hit, and so what we found was they adapted super quickly to that. And so the myth of having people in needs of being co-located for Agile to work kind of got debunked with that team, because they adapted. Well, of course, it wasn't super easy for everyone to go fully remote, but they adapted very quickly. And so as you can see on that slide, the delivery time went from about 7 to 8 weeks to 2 to 3 weeks. But more notably, when the crisis hit, we wanted to cancel a webinar that we had planned and do one on managing the COVID-19 crisis. And so in 8 days, they managed to, it wasn't necessarily sustainable, but in 1 week, they managed to, put out that webinar because they were already used to, they had their culture of talking together on Teams, of looking at their work on their boards. And so they just, doubled down and made it happen. So they went a little bit more, predictable and resilient, and, the adaptation to change was very there.
So where are we in terms of our journey? So from that obvious successful first pilot, the webinar pilot, it's been a year in the making, and it's been a year since we've been exploring Agile. And right now we have identified 2 other similar cases where we can apply Agile in the future. And as you're going to see on the next slide, essentially we've identified webinars, then we are moving another squad for virtual roundtables, and a third squad, events. And you might wonder, well, webinars, virtual roundtables, and events, well, they all, they're pretty much the same with some nuances. And I would certainly agree with you. And the reality is we used to have very dedicated teams doing each of those things. And they were extremely convinced that each of those things were very different. And so our goal is in creating these squads and having, for instance, the same copywriter working in the 3 different squads, is for them to come to the realization, you know what, our work is pretty similar, and our goal ultimately is pull that into one squad, a way more efficient squad, increasing the knowledge and competencies of that writer who can do webinar, virtual roundtables, and events all together, for instance. So increasing their competencies, being from a specialist to more fatter T, like 360 writer. And so this is how we intend to evolve the model. Right now, people are still quite convinced that it's all different, but quickly, and Alex can speak to that, they're seeing how similar the challenges are and how they can come to unblock some of the hurdles and us gain the efficiencies. So what we've learned from this journey of the past year is, first, the Agile coach is really important for us to succeed. Alex has been coming to our leadership meeting almost on a weekly basis, now on a bi-weekly basis, to tell us what are the challenges, who's resisting, what's not working, so we as a management team can really unblock and say, are we still committing to this? Do we want to move forward? So it really gives us a chance to together make the right decisions. Also, it's a huge cultural shift. I will not give you another expression. Culture change is really important, and it's organic. You need to have people to come to terms with the change. And I'm of the view that Agile should be implemented in small steps. And a lot of organizations have gone at Agile, like big bang approach, let's all move to Agile. In what I've observed have failed, and it's quite ironic because the principle of Agile is testing and learning. And so I believe in the incremental way of applying Agile. So some of the questions that we're asking ourselves right now is, it's interesting that we have started with webinars, because webinars, when you think about it, is a tactic, it's a delivery of some of your strategies, whether it's for acquisition or retention. But the product owner got so carried away with, the value we drove from doing webinars that it's starting to become a strategy in itself. Say, whoa, time out. Webinars will not become the strategy. We need to flip it around and say, what's the right way to, for instance, acquire new clients? Maybe webinar is it. So we need to flip it around a little bit while keeping the gains that we got from working Agile. And also, we are ahead of the game with my executive sponsorship of this practice within marketing. I need to make sure that I have the rest of the organization that will also embark on this journey, so we all benefit from agility. So in a nutshell, this is where we are, and these are just some things to keep in mind as you venture into your own Agile journey. Thank you.
Annie, Alex, thank you so much. And, to me, just really quickly before we get out to Alon and sharing what they're doing at Hillrom, it sounds like there's increased adaptability is one of the results of doing this. Not that that's what you were looking for, but also, Alex, that you shared that you're using a lot of tools that you already had in-house, whether it was Microsoft Teams and Azure. So you don't have to go out and get something brand new to start incorporating Agile within the framework of your teams and how you work. So without, again, I don't want to bore anybody. Let's get back to the chorus. So Alon, please share what your team is working on and how you're incorporating an Agile at Hillrom. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tony, and thank you, Annie and Alex, so much for that case study. I'm excited now to talk to you a little bit about Hillrom and what we're doing here. For those of you that don't know Hillrom, we're a medical technologies and health IT company based in Chicago, but offices around the world. And as part of the strategy that we are now pursuing, we acquired a software company about 1.5 years ago named Volt. And I want to introduce Nyla Maroon, my co-presenter. She's the former marketing leader of the Volt, the company Volt that came to us. and she is our resident expert and Agile leader. She adopted Agile after a conversation with her CEO at the time, some years actually after joining Hillrom. And after taking a larger role in Hillrom on my team as our digital center of excellence and digital marketing leader and in corporate marketing, we talked about bringing Agile into the company, into this group. And it seemed like a little bit of a risk, but also the benefits made it to me a no-brainer. So I credit Nyla with bringing the practice in after already refining it at her previous company and implementing it for us here. So let's go to the next slide. Some of the benefits that we talked about initially, I just want to start with these before I hand it off to her to really describe how we use it. When you think of the right side of the manifesto slide that Annie took us through, the benefits that we hope to gain when we started this journey a year and a half ago at Hillrom were really pivoted around these three areas. It's the resource management and the detailed rigor that goes into this methodology. It should give you higher productivity and a better way to predict what you're going to be able to do. So it's really about that resource management. And I'll say this, that it's also rooted in the idea that the people doing the work are also providing the estimates for what it's going to take. So that's a key element there. And the second area that it pivots around is this idea of measurability and being able to deliver what you plan to deliver in a very predictable way and in a reliable way. So you get improved effectiveness and better results. And then the third area is really around people. It's people themselves and the team dynamic. If you can better predict where pinch points are going to occur, where you're overloading the team, or where you might have lumpy, task distribution across a team, if you can predict that and get ahead of it, you can work together in a better, more collaborative way, and you also should be able to, see a boost in staff morale and team morale because they're just feeling better about what they're able to get done and what's expected of them. All right, next slide. So let's talk about Hillrom specifically. What do we actually use Agile for? So starting with kind of what we work on and the work itself, I break it down into two areas. Number one is just the meat and potatoes, the marketing itself, right? The activation and optimizing the activation. That's campaign planning and execution, optimizing and managing the leads. It's also running our editorial calendar and our content and social media and our web properties, and then developing content as well. We include that in the activation work. But the other really important piece of this, and this is at the heart of Agile, is building capabilities. And so think of building out our tech stack, looking at our processes and analyzing them and improving them over time, doing the work required for that, and then working on better ways to report and measure on what we do so that we can get better line of sight to ROI is built into our sprint process. And then our development work around our digital platforms, web included, and then brand tools as well. When you think of all the tools you have to send out in terms of toolkits and guidelines and photography and video and things like that, and how you manage all those assets, those are capabilities that are important to the entire company, and we build those right into our sprint in Agile practice. And in terms of how we work, I'll just tee this off with a couple of ideas here. If you can just go to the previous slide just a little bit longer. Our squads are broken down into web, demand gen, and content currently. We have a process, as Annie described, also for intake of requests. And we'll go into this a little bit more. We use a software platform named Jira that is also used by product developers frequently to manage the work. And our sprints are 3 weeks. We've got sprint planning sessions at the beginning of every sprint. And then our story points, that the way we measure the work are worth 0.75 points, or equal roughly to a workday. And we look for around 13 points per person in each sprint to be a level load or less if possible. So with that, I think that just tees up Nyla to kick us off and look at really what's the experience like from inside an Agile marketing process. So Nyla, over to you.
Thank you, Alon. I appreciate that. And something to note is that with any type of new process or methodology that you bring in, especially something that hasn't really been adapted at a high level throughout the marketing world, it's important that your leadership is on board with that concept, because if they're not there to support that idea of bandwidth and capacity to help communicate that to the rest of the organization, it can be challenging. So it's been refreshing to come to an organization the size of Hillrom and be able to implement something like this and it being so open. So it really speaks to the leadership and the vision that Alon and the team have. So thank you for that. So basically on this slide, what you're looking at is our sprint planning process. And as Alon mentioned, our sprints are in 3-week increments. We meet every Friday, and we actually just wrapped up a sprint planning session earlier today. And during those planning sessions, we spend the first 15 minutes highlighting our highs and lows. Team members share what kind of their favorite part of the sprint was and what was potentially challenging. It kind of allows the team to have an open forum and engage in open conversation. And in order to be as productive as possible, we then transition to reviewing what user stories were not completed in the sprint. I know some teams review everything, but we try to maintain it to a certain limit at a time. So we try to understand why it wasn't completed, if there was a blocker, if we underestimated on points, or if there's some other factor. And something to point out here is that it's not, we do this not to point fingers or place blame, but to better understand some of the challenges that they're facing. And so that way we can help them progress in the next sprint and make sure that they complete the user story and be as successful as possible. So we also share out completed projects. So whether it's a new website, campaign, software completion, we take a couple of minutes during a specific team member sprint review to share what they've worked on. And this allows us to highlight the work that's been created and really highlight that team member. And when it comes, once we do that, we complete the sprint and look at the backlog. And prior to every sprint planning, it's the responsibility of the managers to work with their team members to ensure that their backlog is properly organized and ready for the next 3 sprints. However, we always run into scenarios where user stories from the recent sprint have to move into the new sprint, and so we have to reprioritize. There's also situations where one person is overcommitted, and we have to understand if there's something that can be handed off to another team member, postponed, or if other resources need to be brought in. I also highlight here that we do a retrospective at the end of every sprint. This doesn't happen every sprint, but depending, it all depends on timing. But I do make an effort to get direction and feedback offline of what's working and not working. And then we also host a weekly stand-up every Monday. This meeting allows us to review any new requests that come in, evaluate their priority, and either assign them, place them in the backlog, depending on due date, or engage with the requester for more information. And then we also discuss any blockers or other topics. And so when you look at the next slide in regards to what we're using, Jira is a very common Agile tool for product development. One that, as Alon had mentioned, I had used in my previous role and was very familiar with. But when coming into Hillrom, I decided to make sure that I looked at other tools to make sure that I wasn't overlooking anything. And I did look at Asana and Bright. However, based on the fact that Hillrom already had the software and was using it in IT, along with the fact that it was built for Agile use for a large team of collaborators, it just made sense and was really easy to implement. So it took a little time for some of the team members to grasp the concept, I'm not gonna lie, but we stuck with it. It's been 1.5 years, and actually they've opened it, they've welcomed it, they've been very open to it, and they're happily using it now, and all of our team members have fully adopted it, so it's pretty exciting. So what does it exactly look like? This is a great sample of a view of our backlog. At the top of the screen, there is where you can find all of the squad and team members and easily filter by them to see what their sprint entails. We then have a view of our current sprint right below that. And you could see to the right, it's very tiny, but to the right, it provides us some of the total points across the entire team for that sprint. This gives us an idea of how much our entire team is working on. We can also see our next sprint, which at Hillrom, we kind of use as a priority queue to our backlog. One thing that I've realized is that I've kind of used this in the way that works best for us, and this is kind of how I queue it up. So this enables us to move user stories that are deprioritized in active sprints into the next sprint or the future sprint. So we ensure that it's completed and that we kind of have it there. And lastly, there's the actual backlog. The backlog can be a selection of user stories either submitted by our team members, by the businesses that we support, or simply ideas that our team members have and want to keep track of for the future, for future development. And this should be reviewed and organized regularly. And then you have a sample of a user story. So we draft user stories in a way that clearly defines what is expected to be completed in that 3-week sprint. So I try to ask my team members to be as clear and concise as possible with their user stories. So within each user story, as you can see to the right, there could be one or multiple subtasks to support its completion. And in this instance, this is Megan's sprint. She has multiple web pages that need to be developed and published in order to consider this user story completed. But you'll also notice that we update the user stories and the subtasks with notes. So like you can see in review or blocked on there. And it's just an easy way for our team members to kind of see things at a high level. It varies. It's more of a preference than anything else, but I allow the team members to use it as they see fit. And then lastly, this next view is kind of the team member, individual team member view. So if we can move on to the next slide. It allows us to see how many points each individual team member is committed to. We really try not to go above 13 points on average. If we do go over, there has to be a reason for it, such as a launch is about to take place or a project is going live. The team understands that there are times when leading up to a major go live that we will be taking on more points than usual since it's crunch time. However, it should be the exception and not the standard. This view also allows us to prioritize resourcing discussions with our supporting businesses. So an example is we recently had a demand manager that was at 20 points after our sprint planning, and I couldn't get her to prioritize because she said the business needed everything ASAP. So I scheduled a meeting with the marketing executive for that team and walked her through to better understand the workload, discuss priorities, and then potentially rearrange the user stories. And it was a success. We actually walked through each one of these and we were able to identify a level of priority. And this process helped us get down to 12.5 points. And it's a great way to collaborate and also empower your businesses by letting them make the decision of what they feel is a priority within their business and what's not. So in terms of, a few examples of activation and capabilities that Alon had mentioned earlier, for activation, we had 2 items. We had this one campaign that we launched last July focused on supporting our customers during a pandemic. And this was a corporate-led initiative that had a lot of exposure with our ELT, or executive leadership team. But we also had to launch it quickly to ensure that we didn't miss the opportunity to share that message and that it would resonate with our audience in a timely fashion. So by deciding to roll out in phases, it really helped us go live in 4 weeks, which we all know that it's not an easy feat when you're talking about a corporate campaign, especially when you have legal, regulatory, and compliance involved. So we were able to chop up the go live into segments and go live in 2 weeks and then expand it over the next 2 to 4 weeks. We also had a cardiology campaign that we realized was not converting leads. So we immediately assembled a task force that really helped dive in and understand why this was happening. And the team over about 2 to 4 weeks, a 2 to 4 week period, made some minor tweaks until it finally hit. And finally, we realized that introducing display ads to drive awareness and build targeting pools for this specific campaign really helped kind of make that shift. I'm not sure if you want to add anything to those, Alon, or not.
No, you got it. Thank you.
Wonderful. And then on the right-hand side, in terms of capabilities, Hillrom went through a massive rebrand last July, and it's an ongoing initiative. But as part of that, we needed to launch a site in the US. So we went ahead and agreed on an MVP, which is a minimal viable product. Went live with it in July, which we considered a release 1, July of 2020. Then we went with another release 2, which included global and microsite enhancements for release 2 in December. And now we're working on release 3, which includes authentication and customer service. So we're kind of aligning that MVP, minimal viable product, with our sprint and agile marketing planning. And then lastly, it also works for implementation of software. We were looking for a reporting tool, and we identified Datarama as that one tool. And one of our demand managers took lead on that. And we identified, hey, what do we need? What's the MVP to get it live? So at least we can start using it. Not every connector needs to be integrated. We just need to figure out how we can get up and running. And by identifying that, we launched it in, I think, about probably 6 weeks, give or take. And now we're moving on to the next phase and adding enhancements as we go along. So, you know, we don't think about it as a done and move on. It's let's get live, let's get it working, and then let's figure out how we can improve as we go along.
All right, thank you, Nyla. So let's close the Hillrom case study here with this 2 quick slides. One about sort of how it looks now after a year and a half, how we feel about the results we've gotten, and then maybe a little bit of a look forward as well. You know, when you think about what we set out to accomplish, I can say that we really have seen great and dramatic results here. I think in 3 areas, I'd break them out here. And in terms of the people and that sort of team morale and the way we work, we have been able to really distribute the work more evenly across the team and address overloading issues quickly before they happen, which is much, much more effective. And we've been better able to coordinate our tasks. We've also seen that morale boost. I think people feel like they have a greater sense of accomplishment when they know they can get something done in a sprint and they can deliver, you know, on the promise they've made to stakeholders and coworkers and work partners. From an accomplishment, you know, and from a delivery perspective, the say-do performance has gone up significantly, and the transparency too, as Nyla described. When you can have a conversation with a work partner or fellow leader and say, here's exactly what we have, and you can look at it anytime, by the way, that goes a long way. And then I think finally, and I saw one question pop up in the chat here, you know, a lot of other organizations are adopting Agile, and many development partners, like people working on your website, you know, and even some agencies are adopting Agile. So we found it really useful to be able to understand the vocabulary, the methodology, and communicate just very, very smoothly and seamlessly with, you know, some of the partners and vendors that we work with that work in a sprint, you know, drumbeat to a sprint drumbeat, and where we're talking about defining user stories in advance. We understand the value of that, and we know exactly what to expect when we engage in that work with them. So that's been really valuable too. And then the last slide here, just, you know, a look forward, the research and the thinking that Nyla and I have done, and also, by the way, some of the great and sage wisdom of Jonathan Kopolsky, who you'll hear from 2 weeks from now if you join us, you know, made us think a little bit about, you know, what more we can do. How can we optimize Agile, you know, at Hillrom? And these are the areas that we thought of just, you know, looking forward here. We can probably do more with that sort of test, scale, and learn mindset. We use it quite a bit, but there are still cases where we backslide a little bit, and, you know, and there are probably more opportunities. So we're going to look for more opportunities to do that. And it's really about, and it goes with the second one, gathering data and using it to make decisions around what you're going to do for MVP and how to optimize everything you do. Increasing our ability to measure everything essentially is sort of a next stage and an enhancement there. And I think, you know, it's around squads and teams. This sense of empowerment goes along with the mindset. If you empower a team to get to collaborate and face a challenge and work through some of the challenges, and empower them to make that decision making at the lowest possible level, we can do more in that space. You know, it's always a temptation, especially with very high visibility campaigns or projects, to you know, make a recommendation and push it up the chain for decisions. But we're going to look harder at where we can avoid doing that and really keep that decision making at the lowest level possible. And then finally, I think Annie mentioned it too. Agile is not something you push. You know, it requires a commitment to the process and really to try doing it. We have definitely at Hillrom an opportunity, I think, to broaden the use of Agile, even within marketing, to our regional teams who are managed in a decentralized way. But we're not making an edict, and we're not going to force that on anybody. I think the plan going forward is to simply continue operating and highlight the benefits and invite others to see what we're doing and collaborate with them and see if we can broaden the practice out as the internal demand you know, allows us to do. So with that, I hope you appreciated getting a really detailed look into exactly how this works for us and how we're using it. We're definitely planning to continue on this path.
Alon and Annie, thank you so much. We're opening everything up here. There are a couple of questions, and I know, Alon, you addressed Chuck Kaiser's question. He had volunteered already to ask the question. So Chuck, if you're willing to, please unmute yourself and ask the question. And Annie, if you'd be willing to provide some feedback on that, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, well, Alon, you already somewhat attacked it. As part of, it seems as though your work that you were referencing here was both a straddling of go-to-market work as well as product dev, or was it just explicitly product dev?
No, it's both. It's
okay,
both.
yeah, so you're straddling both, and depending on how much you actually use agencies for the former or the latter, how much true adoption are you seeing from business marketing agency partners or web developers, et cetera, in terms of, it seems as though Agile is supposed to drive the mark of efficiency, quick realization whether campaigns are working or not, pivot, et cetera. And of course, we, the agencies, love to work as quickly as we can in accordance with that, but also like some cerebral moments and to a little bit more handcrafting of some of the work for quality. So talk about a little bit of that, if there's a tug of war there, or if agencies are readily adapting, et cetera. I'm quite curious about that.
Well, we don't force agencies to adapt, and adopt Agile for us necessarily, but I would say, Chuck, that certainly all of the web developers that we worked with recently, and with a global web replatforming, we've done a lot of work with them and are doing a lot of work with them. They all use Agile, and we talk about it every day, multiple times a day with them. We're reviewing, the progress of their sprint for us, and we're making sure that the user stories are holding and that we're unblocking any blocked, work streams. So we're doing that constantly. With agencies, I'd say it's a mix. Some agencies use the terminology and loosely use Agile, and we appreciate that. Sometimes we talk about sprints, campaigns in terms of sprints, but I haven't seen as methodical and rigorous, a methodology necessarily applied in agencies yet. It seems a lot more fluid, and some of the terminology is used, but it's not, hey, we're doing this in this 3 weeks and that's it, But we don't feel like we need to force that on them either. The things that we own and the actions that we own are planned in an Agile methodology.
Yeah, Annie referenced culture being a big factorial to that too. And on our side, I lead our communications technology initiative for Edelman and lead one of our B2B units. And we referenced the mentality, or the cultural mentality, as being fast twitch, right? But at the same time, I think we need to go to school more pervasively on the actual technology overlay to apply the same rigor. So thank you for the commentary.
Mm-hmm.
And I can totally echo what Alon has just described. This is exactly the same for us. We're in the midst of replatforming ourselves as well. And so we've been working with our partner, both the vendor for the platform and the integrator, and everything is being done in Agile. So we have multiple squads, and the Scrum Master is actually from the integrator. So it's all done remotely with 3 different organization, the integrator and the vendor. So this is exactly the way that Nayla has described. We work on the web as well. But from a campaign perspective, and I think it was brought up, the agencies are all talking the talk, but we've been really struggling in integrating that way of working. We had plan, we had boards, we had sprints, and it has never been sustainable because they work on multiple accounts. So if they have one client's dedicated, if their team is dedicated to your account, which is unlikely in many cases, depending on the level of investment that you have. So that's why, it's really a hybrid when it comes to working with the agencies on traditional or campaigns per se. That's been our experience.
So I think this is fantastic. Yeah, thank you, Chuck, for asking the question, and Alon and Annie expanding on that. And I love that you brought up that it depends on the relationship and what needs to be done. And at the core, I think it was mentioned earlier, Agile should be Agile. If it becomes too strict, where's the benefit to it? And at the same time, there's appreciation for the rigor and the discipline and staying attached to it. George Steinitzer, you had a question. If you'd be willing to, we're happy to open your mic so you can ask that as well.
Sure. My question is, if everything gets treated as a sprint, who's thinking about the marathon? Who's getting ready for the big things? This seems fine for little nibbles.
I love that question. And it goes back to what I was saying. When we started doing webinars in Agile, and the product owner of our webinar squad starting becoming, the strategy itself, and started just wanting to do more webinars and optimizing and doing more and more and more, we say, whoa, wait a minute. How does it attach to the bigger picture and the business strategy? So right now we're kind of holding back and saying, okay, does it, let's look at what business goal we're trying to meet, and will webinars be the tactic to use to drive those business results? And so this is the marathon. So that's why, we have to flip it around and look at the bigger picture, because otherwise it's just like Agile for the sake of Agile will not yield the desired outcome.
Yeah, and I'll
if
comment.
I may add, Annie.
I'll comment too, George.
Sorry, go ahead.
The marathon is important too. And by the way, I mean, the methodology doesn't necessarily preclude that. Our initial release of our new website took a year to get out, which was actually ambitious. And there were a total, I think, of 8 sprints that the developer did together with us, and that we participated in as well. Because as you know, the client side has to do quite a bit during replatforming. So you can think about, there's a longer arc that you use to manage your big objectives and your strategic priorities, but you can break it down and get the work done that way. And I think there's one other question too that Gina asked here on the chat that may be related to this. How did you do it before, and how does that differ from maybe a longer view? Well, I think you've all had experiences where, you have staff meetings every week and everybody updates you on their current projects, and each of those projects has a project plan, but they feel a little bit more disconnected and a little more open loop. And, some of these projects take a long time, and it's just not as easy to really define what are we getting done in the next 3 weeks. And what step forward will we be able to make that gets us to the finish line eventually, versus saying, this sort of fell below the priority line and it just took a lot longer because there were a lot of fires, So this allows you to manage that. I think manage some of that chaos and those competing priorities in a more effective way, so that you can actually get the marathon, the marathons run in the end.
Well, thank you so much.
To add to that, actually, really quickly. In regards to kind of looking at this marathon component, keep in mind that there is still a planning phase, right? You're not just looking at 3 weeks at a time. There is a requirement to still plan, at least on our end, to plan from a campaign perspective ahead of time. So you have to develop that project brief. You need to create that marketing plan, and from planning, from kickoff to go live. And then what you do is you figure out, okay, how are we going to plan this out in sprints to get it done by this time frame? And the best part about this is that before we started doing Agile marketing planning, it was pretty much everybody was doing everything, and you didn't know where anything was. And it was very little progress that was happening to get one campaign live. Whereas we made this shift now, the transparency of how much each person's workload is really allows them to own their projects and feel empowered to get them completed by the end of the sprint and actually make things move along faster. And I think the challenging part most people have is they think, it's just 3-week increments, but we're actually planning long-term. We actually look at it on a quarterly basis and start moving things around to help figure out, okay, a project is kicking off here, it's gonna end here, how is everything else gonna fall in between? So although we do speak in 3-week increments, there is that larger discussion on the front end of the back end for planning.
And Annie and Alex, give you just really quick, some thoughts on this, and then want to move into the networking afterward, because a lot of people have to drop off here really soon. Annie, Alex, please.
Nyla covered it, so I will.
Right.
I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you. So we are going to be going into a networking. If you'd like to go, Dakota, do you have any last words before we do this?
Just thank you, first and foremost, especially to Annie, Alon, Tony, Nyla, Alex, everybody for, just awesome content and the willingness to share that, but also to everybody that was able to make the time to join today. I think that's a big testament to what we try to accomplish as marketers, and particularly within this organization, of being willing to share knowledge with our peers, so that we can really elevate the the profile of what we're all doing together. So thank you for that. For those of you that cannot stay into the networking session, have a